So today we're going to think about training by time rather than training by distance. If you think back to your early days of running, perhaps you started by doing the Couch to 5K program, and Couch to 5K is very much based on building up your running by time. So you may start with a minute of running followed by a minute of walking, another minute of running, and then you gradually build it up. But once we become more interested in runners as doing things like parkrun, 5Ks, 10Ks, and then on to half marathons and marathons, what tends to happen is that many of us switch our training to training by distance. So we aim to go out and run 6 miles or 7 miles or 8 miles or 9 miles or 20 miles, whatever it is that our training plan calls for. And that's great when you're training on the road for a distance-based event. But as you get more into your trail running, you'll start to realise that actually that can bring problems, particularly as we get into the autumn and winter seasons, because a run in the summer that might have taken you, let's say a 5-mile run, you went out and it took you a certain amount of time during the summer when the ground is dry and the conditions are really good. When it starts to get into the winter and the conditions change drastically underfoot, so your route might become really muddy, it might have a lot of water on it, for example, you're going to start finding that your 5-mile run takes you an awful lot longer than it did when you were running it on hard ground. So that can present a few problems. Firstly, if you've only got a limited amount of time to train, it means that you might find yourself having to cut short what you'd planned to do because you've actually run out of time. There might be people at home who are worried about you. If you've decided you're going to run 10 miles and it takes you half an hour longer than it did in the summer, then you're going to have people that are wondering where on earth you've got to. And also it affects your training intensity, because if you go out to run 5 miles and in the summer that was a fairly straightforward 5 miles and you came back feeling quite fresh, having had an easy run, in the winter you can actually find, with the combination of the ground conditions and the weather, that you are working an awful lot harder than you expected to. So you're actually starting to wear yourself out more, and if you do that consistently run after run, you're going to put yourself at risk of injury and of overtraining. So what a really good approach to take is to try and switch at least some of your runs to running by time. So rather than saying, okay, I'm going to go out and run 6 miles today, say I'm going to go out and I'm going to run for an hour. And no matter how far you get in an hour becomes irrelevant, because you know that you're going to have had some good quality training for an hour, and it will have done you good. You're not going to be late back, and you will have achieved your objective, and it becomes a much more effective way, I think, of training during those winter months in particular, if not all year round. There also comes a point when you are starting to think about really long events. So for example, if you get into marathon training or perhaps ultra training, there comes a point beyond which actually training starts to do you harm rather than good. If you've ever read anything about marathon training, you'll often see that people say that 3 hours really is the longest training run that you should do. I would question that number. I think that a lot of people can cope with more than that, providing it's done at a really easy pace. But again, you want to be focusing on building up the time that your body can cope with and not the actual distance. And what I would suggest you do is, no matter what distance you are actually training for, that you actually try it and see if it has a positive effect on your running. It's certainly my preferred way of training, and I think for many of you will find that it is too.